a long time ago, I heard this, and I'm just going to give this news, and it goes back to my favorite part about my job is I tell a pastor, tithe your time to your city and watch what happens in you and in your church. Let God break your heart for the division that is happening both inside the church that you're called to steward and shepherd, and break your heart for the division between the churches in your community, and just watch what happens in you and in the church and the people that you serve that God's called you to steward and shepherd.
Welcome to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Bryant. In every episode, we bring in guests who will inspire, encourage you to be more effective in your mission field. On today's episode, I'm excited to have with me Rob Kelly. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good, Eric. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I'm excited to learn more about the City Leaders Collective, your website, cityleaderscollective.org. I was introduced to you by a mutual friend saying there are some amazing things happening in terms of churches coming together, representing Jesus so much better than what's maybe on the news. They're in Charlotte. Maybe talk a little bit about how your efforts, which are now called For Charlotte, got started.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. So I've been out here in Charlotte for, I guess, 25 years now, originally from Seattle, and got into ministry early on as a pastor. And you begin to quickly see both inside each like local churches, but also between local churches. There's just a lot of division, a lot of disconnection. And I just, as a young pastor, didn't make a ton of sense to me. And in seminary at Gordon Conwell, met a guy who would become my best friend. And we ended up starting a ministry together called Charlotte One. And Charlotte One in the early kind of mid 2000s was connecting churches to reach young adults. And I always share a little bit of that because it's really shaped my story, that even in the name Charlotte One, we would do like a Tuesday night worship gathering. We had probably 30, 40, 50 churches at one point connecting to reach young adults in the city. And that name Charlotte One kind of encapsulates the heart behind, really what's turned into my kind of my call in ministry over the last 20 plus years. And Charlotte is about a city and the oneness of the church. Jesus prays, may they be one so that the world may know. And I've just always been just compelled and enamored by that prayer of Jesus, and which I, then learned later is literally everywhere in the text, that we're called to this oneness and unity. And so we ran that ministry for a number of years. In 2010, we started tilling soil for what would be the For Charlotte network. We started realizing we're going to need senior leaders at the table, senior pastors of churches, ministry leaders of influence in our city. And so we started connecting pastors and leaders, and over time it grew, and we developed a network of networks model that we call a meta network structure, where today it's cool. I mean, there's 30 networks across our city. I think as of last week, there was 485 churches, about 230 nonprofits that are all part of these different networks, obviously thousands of leaders that make up those organizations. And we kind of organize them and really serve and support pastors and leaders in our city to, connect them around mission, around, we want to see flourishing leaders. So pastors, nonprofit, Christian business leaders, flourishing organizations, churches, nonprofits, businesses, all working together in flourishing networks, which we have many of, all for the holistic flourishing of our city, right? And so that's kind of like in that process. And we have our networks kind of organized around what we call the four greats. And those four greats would be the great commandment to love God, neighbor, self. And so those would be like networks around prayer, getting people together around prayer, worship. We address a lot of like soul care as well. We're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. So what is healthy? What does the health of leaders look like? Next, the great compassion is to love and serve the least of these. So we have probably 7 or 8 different great compassion networks for foster care, addressing emergency response, disability ministry, et cetera. A great commission, obviously, which is to make disciples. So we have evangelism, church planting, micro church. There's a number of, I think we have 7 or 8 different great commission, discipleship, evangelism focused networks. And then finally, the great collaboration, which is really kind of subsumes all of that, is like, how do we bring the church together in the oneness that Jesus prayed for and commanded in the upper room? And those have really been focused on the health of pastors and leaders. And we have 10 kind of networks geographically around Charlotte that focus on senior pastors and connecting them well. And so really that over the last 15 years, that's what's kind of developed into what is now the For Charlotte network. Our job is to serve all of those leaders and organizations that are part of our network.
Well, it's a beautiful picture of what the church, Big C, can be. I think one of my favorite groups I'm a part of is a group of pastors that get together here in South Austin once a month. We share a meal, we share our hearts, we commiserate, we collaborate. What are some of the stories coming out of For Charlotte? I'd love to hear the
Sure.
power of this unity and how this message of Jesus is being proclaimed maybe in a more vibrant way.
Yeah. I mean, so when it started, we had, like anything, you don't really know what you're doing. You're just trying to get pastors in rooms together and, you see what God does. But over time, trust is really the currency of the kingdom. And so as time and relationship and trust is built, really cool things happen when you get people around a shared table praying, building relationship and trust and discerning together. And over the years, there's so many cool things that God's done that we probably couldn't have foreseen. But just to yes, for some examples, as the network grew, we were able to, for instance, to address a lot of the, racial unrest in our city. We had a couple officer-involved shootings that we were able to bring pastors and leaders together around reconciliation efforts and prayer in our city. COVID, because our network had grown, our city reached out to us. And this is just, these may sound like vanity metrics, but I think that they actually help paint a picture of what happened. Our city manager asked us to lead the emergency response efforts during COVID for all non-governmental organizations because we had such a large network. So I had a very different COVID experience than most people. I spent every day for the first 6 months of COVID from 7:30 a.m. till probably 7:30 p.m. at the emergency response center, organizing the efforts to mobilize people to serve those that are in need during COVID, mobilizing meals for people with vulnerable families, children, special needs, caring for the children of first responders as they were serving in the hospitals. And over that time, in those 6 months, we mobilized it was 34,242 volunteers. And it won all these awards by the state, the governor, all these things. And it was, we served 4.5 million meals. The numbers were just crazy. And at the end of the day, it was an amazing, it won awards for this great community-wide effort. But I always like to say it was actually a church effort because as the organizer of it, we saw all the data and 98% of the 34,000 plus volunteers came from local churches. And
That's
so it's just like, and that's just the power of a network, right? Networks that people were compelled to serve and you asked, and there was a lot of other people in this community that served as well, but it was a beautiful picture of that. Often like to say that networks help what wants to happen. And so our job oftentimes is to listen. Where is God moving in the leaders and the pastors and the churches? And then how do we bring them together to kind of serve where the Holy Spirit's already moving? And so through that, we've established church planting networks. We have 6 churches being planted right now out of that network. I just had lunch actually with one of our planters. He's amazing. You could go on and on. Yeah, there's so many stories. Those are just a couple that I'll start with.
I love it. I feel like my experience here in Austin has had so much partnership in ways that I didn't see in Los Angeles or in Seattle that's been really fruitful. There's just something really wonderful when the city or the mayor is calling the church to say, help. For us, it was after Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah,
And some of the bigger churches, all the pastors came together, met with the mayor. And at that point, as they asked, what can we do to serve? He said, well, this might sound odd, but would you help us teach third graders how to read?
yeah,
And he began to explain that the way they determined their budget of how many prison cells they needed was looking back to see how many third graders could not read. Because if you aren't reading by third grade, after that, you're learning to read. After that, you're reading to learn.
that's right.
If they drop out of high school, there's a likelihood they'll get involved in activity that leads to incarceration. And we mobilized thousands of people into the public schools to mentor these third graders. And it was really a beautiful experience. And I love hearing some of those stories out of Charlotte. Of course, the website for more on the Charlotte area of getting involved there is forcharlotte.org. But if a pastor or church leader is listening to this thinking, man, I wish we had something like that where I am, cityleaderscollective.org is probably where they want to go. Talk a little bit about that ministry.
Yeah. So, dear friend of mine and mentor, Eric Swanson, who's kind of like, I guess Eric has been kind of a friend to many people that are doing this work, kind of leading city network or city movement organizations like For Charlotte all over the world and country. And I met Eric many, many years ago, became a friend and mentor. And he was kind of helping coach and encourage cities. Over time, I began to do the same thing. And he was like, Rob, you're doing this. You should be helping others. In 2020, during COVID, kind of after things were starting to settle down a little bit, he came out here and was sitting right here in my office where I'm sitting right now, the two of us, and we're like, hey, we should really formalize what we're doing. And so we started the City Leaders Collective that day in 2020. And now what we do is for people that God is really calling, that their hearts are breaking for the division of the church in their city. Their heart is just compelled by Jesus's prayer to see the church come together in oneness for the flourishing of the city. We help those leaders cultivate networks that seek the holistic flourishing of cities. And a lot of pastors that are passionate about this begin to step into roles like this. And so that's what I was. I was a local church pastor in a church, and my heart started breaking, and I didn't have a framework for it. I didn't know. I mean, if I go back 15, 20 years, we were just trying to get pastors in rooms together, had no framework for any of it, had no idea what God would do or how he would use it. And now we've developed tools and coaching and frameworks. Right now alone, we have 34 cities in North America in a coaching cohort with about 65 leaders. Then we have another 70 leaders from 15 or 20 Latin American cities in a Spanish language cohort, where we're monthly walking alongside these city movement leaders to help them solve for everything they need to solve for to build and lead these unifying backbone structures in cities. And we have two different frameworks that we use to do that. We have a big toolbox of over 100 tools that help people do the day job. And we, more than that, and I think this is the big thing, that the thing that we love about the idea that it is a collective, it's leaders coming together that have a shared passion, shared heart for their city. And what we do is create platform there for them to come into relationship with one another, serve, to learn from one another. It really is a collective of leaders on mission together in relationship to do this work. And so, yeah, you can learn more at cityleaderscollective.org, and you can hear about our coaching. You can learn about our framework, some of the leaders that we have doing it. Kind of like the top practitioners in the space also become coaches, the ones that are doing the work. So it's really everyone that's part of it we're all kind of player coaches, if you will. Like we all are practitioners, but then we're helping serve people that want to do this elsewhere as we're serving in our own cities.
Well, for those who are hearing this and thinking, I am just overwhelmed trying to just survive taking care of my own church.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to, maybe this is where we delve into Metanoia, the book you wrote with
Sure.
Alan Hirsch, but give that framework behind why this is so important.
Yeah, it's funny when Alan asked me to be a part of this book. I mean, listen, I've loved Alan for many years, and he's like a joke. I've kind of had a man crush on his mind since I first read Shaping of Things to Come back in '03, and he became a friend and mentor to me over the years. And when he asked me to join the Metanoia book, which I was super humbled to be able to be a part of, and still grateful for the opportunity, it really did scratch an itch that was super needed even for my day job. One thing, and before I even talk about the book, I'll say why I think the book was so important to me, because I learned something over the years of doing this job. I meet with hundreds of pastors for a living. I mean, I just got to know kind of the DNA. I am a pastor or former recovering pastor. I don't know what you want to call me. And one of my absolute favorite part about my job is that when you can sit with a pastor and they can experience kind of two ahas, like what I would now call metanoia almost moments, would be one when they first and foremost see the church down the street not as their competition but their teammate. One, that they're not alone, that they realize they're not alone. And two, when they really see their mission field, because when they see their city, most pastors, they get so caught up in the day-to-days that it can be very myopic. They get caught up in the arguments, and Sundays come around with alarming regularity, and people are arguing about the color of the carpet, and it can become very internally focused. But when they can get their eyes up, and I've had more pastors tell me, Rob, like when I lock arms with other pastors in the city and we're doing mission in the city together, that's why I got into this game in the first place. That's why I'm doing this. And like that is metanoia. And I realized a long time ago that if I did my job perfectly and I had the best networks doing the best mission in the city, I'm still only going to get maybe 1% of a pastor's time, because appropriately, most of their time is focused on their day-to-day call. But how do you help that pastor in the other 99% really infuse like kind of that DNA of like, man, we are part of a kingdom? And so metanoia came from, obviously, it's the word that we translate from Greek into the word repent or repentance. It's the first word that Jesus says when he begins his preaching ministry. Matthew 4:17, metanoia, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's how God designed people, churches, and organizations to be transformed. I mean, like it is, and it's more, oftentimes the word metanoia has a very, almost reductionist way we talk about it. And people think of repenting as saying we're sorry or we making amends for doing something wrong. When really metanoia is a compound word in the Greek. Meta meaning above, beyond, overarching. Noia, the Greek root nous, is mind. Metanoia has to do with a radical reorientation of our mind. It's about a paradigm shift. And that's why when Alan asked me to be a part of it, it's like, man, this is amazing when we can help shift the mindset of leaders to really see the big C church, and that they're not the church in the city, but they're one beautiful expression of Christ's church in their city. And, God does really cool things when that canvas is there. And so that's the heart behind the book. And we have a whole framework about a metanoia journey on what that looks like to follow. And it's been really exciting. We've had, churches and denominations and other networks that are using the book. Even one denomination used it as the theme of their year. And so we have, thousands of churches going through it together. It's just like crazy things that I would not have expected. So yeah, that's a little bit behind the metanoia journey.
Well, I love this idea. I mean, obviously we need a change of mind. We need to really grapple with what God's really calling us to, building the kingdom, bringing more of heaven to earth. Yes. And when we're doing that, people who are skeptical suddenly are more open, because we're not like the angry, judgmental, hypocritical, homophobic Christians on the news. Suddenly we're the people you go to when you need help.
That's right.
Because we have the helper,
That's right.
I am going to give away free copies of your book to those who send in an email after getting my email newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, you can sign up at ericbryant.org. I'd love to hear just one final question, Rob. What encouragement would you give to church leaders, pastors, when it comes to following the Spirit's lead, being willing to innovate, maybe even getting past just survival mode and moving into the new thing God is doing? What encouragement do you have for us?
I mean, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but again, it's the favorite part about my job is, I can't remember who I stole this from, but a long time ago I heard this, and I'm just going to give this news, and it goes back to my favorite part about my job is I tell a pastor, tithe your time to your city and watch what happens in you and in your church. Because when you tithe and it doesn't have to be just even to a network, but it could be meeting with a pastor down the street, meeting with another church leader, meeting with the principal of the school down the street, meeting with a city council member, meeting with local business leaders out in the city, drive a different way home and pray for your community, and watch as that happens, as you get your eyes outside of the walls of your church, outside the day-to-day grind, outside the Sundays coming Sundays come around with alarming regularity, and just watch what happens in you. Let God break your heart for your church, and man, let God break your heart for the division that is happening both inside the church that you're called to steward and shepherd, and break your heart for the division between the churches in your community. And just watch what happens in you and in the church and the people that you serve, that God's called you to steward and shepherd.
Love that challenge. Thank you so much, Rob. It's cityleaderscollective.org. Keep up your great work. Really appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric.
Thanks for joining us for the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. Go to my website, ericbryant.org, for my newsletter and free resources.